Hello, hello, Santa Clarita. Oh my gosh, it is August 31st. Hopefully it's the last day of summer. Welcome to the Doc and Doc Show. And we have got a great show for you today. I think we have a great show for you every week, actually. And we'd like for you to be part of it. We're inviting you into our offices. Just call, of course, 661-238-5487. Oh, sorry, 298. I was looking, I should have, my glasses. I wrote 23. Sorry out there. 298-5487. 298-5487. Please give us a call and get in on this conversation. We're going to talk about relationships and things that we're seeing in our offices. And Dr. Jenkins, would you like to introduce our guest?
I'd love to. I'd like to introduce the radio audience to Alicia Dukoff, who is doing her doctoral dissertation on therapy and all kinds of therapies. And today we're going to talk about some unusual cases that sometimes you may have, and it has to do with paraphilias. Doctor, what is a paraphilia?
What is a paraphilia? And Alicia's been with us before, and we have had so much fun with her, so...
Yes, and I started off easy on you guys. We're going in a little bit deeper today.
Go for it.
This is all about sex. And the dissertation that I'm going to eventually be doing is regarding human sexuality, but with a whole new spin, basically, because we are coming into newer generations where people are a bit more liberated about the concept of sexuality in their lives.
Do you think they are?
I do.
Okay.
Yeah, I do. From what I see in my offices, and I see a range of clientele from 18 to, I'd say, 55. Individuals and couples, what I'm noticing is that in the younger generations, there is a bit more of a liberated way of being, where they're looking at the societal confines that have been placed on us in the past, and they don't want that. They're more open to their natural urges and what makes them who they are and what makes them whole, and they're more explorative in that journey. And I think that's something to really push and be positive about.
So they're freer. They're freer.
I think so.
To do that. I wonder what makes them freer. I mean, is it the way that, I think we started sex therapy in, 1960
something, right?
And Dr. Ruth started that.
Right, and she was very controversial when she came out because, the concept of talking about sex.
Right.
You have to whisper it prior to 1965.
Right. I went to school at St. Louis, and that's where Masters and Johnson was. So I had lectures from Masters and Johnson. And it was very boring, like I said before.
Right.
And Kinsey. Oh, yeah, I love Kinsey.
Kinsey was good.
There were pioneers.
Yes.
There have always been pioneers in this particular field.
Doctor, I think you would be the next pioneer.
I hope so. I'm going to be going for it. I mean, I just started this whole thing called Let It Loose. And loose is the Latin for light.
All right.
Let it loose.
What does that mean? Tell us about it.
Let yourself loose. Whatever's been inside of you that you've suppressed.
Yeah.
That's where these, quote unquote paraphilias, these sexual deviations come from. It's this suppression of a natural urge that initially is something relatively, I wouldn't say innocent, but it's not a monster. And the suppression of it inside makes it grow bigger and creates that deviation that eventually leads you astray and does very unhealthy things to your life, to your spouse, to yourself, to everything around you. It's the pathway to self-destruction to have that deviation because of some suppression. And I think with what we're talking about now, this whole concept of an opening, of a liberation. It's a movement. It's not in a generation. It's an actual crack in consciousness collectively that everybody is on some level tapping into. And I think the younger generations are more evolved with this. They're more in tune with it than the ones that have come before them. Maybe because of age, maybe because of a freedom of spirit, maybe because the world itself right now is so screwed up that they look at it and they go, well, screw that. Literally, I want something else. I want to come home. I want to be myself. I want to be whole. What does that look like? And so there's not enough of a collective conversation happening about that right now. There are no leaders in that yet. And that's what I want to push forward. This concept of let it loose. It's let yourself loose. Let yourself be that light that you are. Don't suppress what is naturally inside of you that creates so much power in you to be whole with. If you can love yourself with that I'm supposed to try to restrict it, suppress it, put it in the darkest corner of, the back room, lock it away. What do you think happens with it? As a psychologist, what happens when you suppress an urge?
Oh, it gets horrible. It eats you up inside, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. That's what I've always said. It's not what you say that hurts. It's what you don't say.
Exactly.
And you keep all that inside, and that happens in relationships all the time. I see it in my office. Let's talk about, I want you to define for our audience, because I think sometimes when we talk about health, medicine, sexuality, we assume, because we've been doing this for a long time, we assume people know what that means. We've defined libido, we've defined all kinds of words that we take for granted. So can you explain to people, what's a paraphilia? That's a big word.
It
paraphilia.
Is. Paraphilia. It's not a sexy word. They should probably come up with a better word.
Paraphilia.
Paraphilia. No, see, you can't even make that sexy. So basically what that is, it's a sexual deviation. If everybody's on a spectrum, a sexual spectrum. Okay. Spectrum meaning there's point A on the left and point B all the way to the right. And as human beings, we are on some level of that spectrum sexually, as far as how liberated we are, where we're willing to go, how much we've explored about ourselves sexually. The concept of us as sexual beings is actually in and of itself something that has been suppressed.
Right.
Up until recent years. In the last 50 years, more so, people have come to terms with the fact, more than ever before, that we are actually sexual beings. But in a lot of cultures and, societal confines have told us we're not allowed to be in a lot of ways. So a lot of these sexual urges were suppressed initially from the earliest stages of our development based on how we were raised, based on what we were taught in society, in school, in our cultures, in our homes, by our parents. Okay, so here we are on this spectrum of exploration, right? And let's say point A is like the most innocent little lamb you're ever going to know. And point B at the other end of the spectrum is like the dark side, so to speak. Now, that's a relative term in and of itself, because everybody has a different level of it. But we all find ourselves on some level of that spectrum as we explore ourselves sexually. The paraphilias come from when you have suppressed a natural sexual urge that you have inside of you. A natural urge to explore something. And because of how you were raised, because of what people are telling you in society, this usually happens at a very early age, so you're not really conscious of it, you suppress it.
Well, that's during your psychosexual development.
Exactly.
At age 4 or 5.
Which Freud and Erikson established really well. These are people that, if you're listening to the show right now and you have any interest in our somewhat more clinical side of this profession, you can look up Erik Erikson, who discussed the psychosocial stages of development, Freud, who talked about the sexual stages of development. These things are very true throughout all of our developmental ages.
Right.
But what's not being talked about is when you suppress them, what happens as an adult. That's the paraphilias. They are sexual deviations that occur in an unhealthy way based on the fact that years ago you suppressed some natural urge that then later came out in this really negative, obsessive, unhealthy behavior.
Well, can you give us an example? Maybe more than one example.
Okay, well, I'm going to give a little one, and then I want this amazing, gorgeous, sexy sexologist that I'm sitting here with that's been doing it longer than I have, right? You've been doing it way longer than me, and you've seen way more than I have. So I'm going to give a little example here, but I want you to go to town on that one, and I'll just add in, okay? So here's a paraphilia that people may see more often than not, than others, really, behind closed doors. This is more out in public. Frotcherism.
Frotcherism, yes.
So frotcherism is when you're walking through a store and somebody walks past you and in a very conscious way rubs against you as though it's on accident. They do it very subtly.
Is it a sexual rubbing against you?
No, it can be like them just passing by you with the shoulder.
Just a touch.
But they get turned on by it.
I always thought it had to be like you had to like walk up to somebody you didn't know and kind of rub their butt.
No, it's absolutely
just like touching the shoulder.
And in fact, the turn on is that it's so subtle. Mm-hmm. It's not in one of the erogenous zones that you're being touched.
Right.
Okay? It's so subtle, the person gets turned on by that. There's a subtlety in it.
They got away with something.
They got away with it.
Oh.
So, and now you're touching on what paraphilias are. It's the concept that we are wrong for feeling this way. We've got to be
like being bad.
Yeah, well, It's part of being human. What's good and bad anyway? Well, whose confines, whose constructs were these? What is good and bad? Okay, so what I'm hoping happens is that the spectrum of A to B that I just described to you guys completely changes. We've got to get rid of the spectrum, because everybody, this 50 Shades of Grey concept,
Right.
we're all different colors on the spectrum. My God, there should be not one particular spectrum that anybody is expected to fall on, because the second that you feel that you don't, there becomes the beginning of a sexual deviation. You are wrong. You are a freak. There's got to be something wrong with me. I've got to suppress this urge. Therefore, I'm not going to feel it. So guess what I do with it? I'm going to stick it in the furthest regions of my mind. I'm going to suppress it way deep down inside in the darkest corner of myself. Throw it in, lock away the key. Throw it up, lock away the key. And years later, that thing that I've pushed away back in the darkest corner,
there it is.
There's that monster, okay? And it's a beast at this point, and it's hungry, and it's been neglected.
It controls you.
Yes.
It defines you.
Yes, in very unhealthy, subversive ways. So that's where these paraphilias come from, so that the guy or the girl walking by you that happens to just gently rub against your shoulder, they just got away with being this bad person, right?
Touching.
So this is where these paraphilias come from. It's completely unhealthy, and it's not necessary, because really probably what that urge was as a child that was suppressed is something very perfectly normal as being a human being. Maybe they had an erection or something, and they were taught that they couldn't.
Right.
They weren't supposed to have that. Maybe they were attracted to the opposite sex at the age of 8, which is when we start to have those feelings for the opposite sex, not sexually, but romantically, and they're taught that they're not supposed to have that. These are all very human things. So the whole conversation needs to change.
It's interesting. When I trained at the American Academy of Clinical Sexology, and I learned then, there probably are more, but I think there were about 68 different that we've defined paraphilias. And we would say, well, gosh, what is considered kinky, and what's considered kinky is what you or I wouldn't do. So if anything that we would do is certainly not going to, we're normal, but we want so much to be normal.
And that's why Kinsey's research in the 50s was so profound, because he literally went door to door asking people about what they felt and what they really wanted and how they were.
So much trouble.
Yeah, because it was the 50s, and it was like the age of total confines in society.
Exactly.
For male and female, the gender roles were very strict, and the marriage roles and the way that things were supposed to be, things were very tightly conserved in these boxes, and God forbid you danced the line outside the box. So what Kinsey realized was most people are bisexual on some level, that there's
because
combination.
People aren't 100% gay or 100% straight. There's some number in between that they are.
Right.
That's what Kinsey's research really highlighted, and boy, do people hate that.
Well, it doesn't fit in with the box that they've been given. So, what we do as sexologists and physicians is we try to think outside the box, because that's generally where the healing is. But I want to address something, and I'm thinking that this might be something that comes up or something that people are thinking about as they're listening. What about healthy sex is culturally defined, our culture, what it is. There's some paraphilias that are illegal. They are...
for good reason, probably.
For good reason, yes.
I think it's about the other entity being consensual or not. So bestiality is not okay. Child pornography is not okay. These other entities are not consenting to the engaging in that act. Yeah.
Of course, in 25 years, I've seen the gambit of all different kinds of paraphilias, but there are some that we have to figure out, yes, it's not going to go away. That's your feeling. That's what's defining you. But you know what? It'll land you in jail, or you'll get in a lot of trouble. Your family will be embarrassed. Something.
So have you had a couple of clients that in the past have pushed that boundary for you, where you've sat in the office with them and they come and they tell you that they have maybe the paraphilia of with children or something,
No.
and you've had to, no, you
have to
don't do
report
that.
It doesn't push my boundary. No, no, it's whatever. Whatever you come in with is fine, and we're going to work with it. Yeah. I have worked with a few pedophiles, and, but we do have to control that feeling in our culture. And, I've worked with many of the others, but which are just fine. And then we figure out how do you integrate that in your relationship and in your life so that it's really okay and you're not living with shame and guilt and all those things.
I think, and it's really important to start this conversation off by addressing that these are the areas that are really the red flags in all societies, and probably should be, because there are things that are just definitely wrong in general, like taking advantage of that child, taking advantage of the animal, and in some cultures that's perfectly normal. Okay,
in Montana, I don't know.
Or, not even in this country, I'll tell you. So the thing is, what we want to discuss is more so the things that most people on a generalized spectrum feel that we happen to suppress. Those are the paraphilias that we mainly see that are more of the fun ones. This is called kinky, people. This is not the levels we've just discussed. Those are the red flags. Those are the things we're going to rule out in today's conversation.
So we're not going to talk about those two things.
We're not going to talk about those two things because those are just,
wrong.
What is wrong and right? But basically those are the red flags. Those are the things
They're
that
unacceptable in today's legal system. How about that?
Okay. That's a safer way to say it, I guess. It's just children and animals should probably be
it's a no-no.
Until they can sign permission.
So the majority of people out there, they fall on some level of kink that is not animals and children.
So there's lots of fun kink.
There's a lot of kink that can be very fun and does not have to turn into a paraphilia that later ends you in this feeling of being detached from yourself being outside of yourself.
Yeah, I think that now that we had this introduction, when we come back from the break, we're going to talk about specifics.
Yeah.
We talked about two things we're not going to talk about because we don't like those things, and we're going to talk about all the other things, the other 59 things.
The fun stuff.
That are kinky and fun.
Yeah,
Call in about your kink.
Maybe there's an app for it.
It's asking a lot. But
we're going to take a break right now. We're at AM 1220 KHTS 298-5487. We're right here in downtown Newhall, so please give us a call. Thanks.